What's up, gang? Welcome to Create with Chris. My name is Chris Long, your host, and I'm going to be going over all the cameras I've had in the past 7 years and why I got them, why I wanted to upgrade them, and yeah, for those of you who are maybe on the fence of buying a new camera and not sure what to go with or even why you want to go with that camera, this is a clarity video, and it's just, going back. I'm going to be reflecting on this myself, and then we'll go over all the new cameras on the market and see like different ones that I recommend and who they would be for, like who I'd recommend them for, and hopefully build some clarity for you guys that are thinking about purchasing either your first camera or, upgrading. So let's get to it. So my first camera was the Canon SL1. Boy, oh boy. I was like, man, I'm spending like $900 right now on like a lens with the camera, or it might have been $700. I don't know, but it was great to learn with. Don't get me wrong. I was shooting music videos with it. I actually shot my first few weddings with it. It was great. Like, it got me to the foundation of where I am today. And, I didn't buy the most fancy thing out there. I didn't need to. I couldn't, but I also didn't need to, reflecting back. And the reason why I ended up upgrading it was probably like about 1.5 to 2 years into taking it seriously, like taking video seriously. It lacked some things. Like the low light was terrible, like I think the phone low light was still, like, it was starting to become better than that. And the slow motion, it was only 60 frames, which is okay. That's all I use mainly anyways. But it was at 720p, like, small resolution. So, and it's funny because I didn't even realize that until like 10 times shooting. I was like looking, I'm like, like, why am I doing that? So I just stopped shooting slow motion altogether and just kept it 1080. And hey, it worked. It worked. It got me off the ground. And I went to upgrade it because, yeah, the low light was poor. The resolution was kind of lacking in my opinion. And I thought, I felt like I was getting better with my editing, and I felt like whenever I was in the editing room, I was looking at my footage and thinking, oh man, if it was only just a little bit like crisper, like, I felt like it was holding me back. I really did. So I ended up upgrading to the Sony A6300. And so, yeah, the only lenses, I wasn't really invested in the Canon. I had the kit lens that came with it, which is what I use the majority of the time. And I had the nifty 50, the cheap 50mm lens. And but it was like super cropped in, so like whenever I was shooting weddings, I didn't find it useful because I didn't want to have to keep switching on and off lenses. So I just used the kit lens. So I wasn't super invested in Canon. So for the Sony, the price point was great for the quality in comparison to what Canon had to offer at the time. And they're all still DSLRs, and this was my first mirrorless. And mind you, these are both crop sensor cameras, if you don't know. And yeah, it was better in low light, better image quality. I could shoot 1080p, 60 frames. That was nice. It had 4K, 24 and 30. Hardly shoot 30. But 24 4K was great because I was starting to get paid shooting weddings. So it was, making my image quality look better, therefore making my brand better. So you are what you put out. And that leads to some problems, though, because I ended up having that camera for roughly 3 years. Yeah, roughly 3 years. It's like, I don't know, it was probably about my 4th year whenever I upgraded. And the things that bothered me about that camera was the 4K looked great, but it had to be like on a tripod because, let's face it, if you're moving around with 4K, it had that rolling shutter. It was like jello. And I did not like that. And it was like, sucked because 4K was becoming way more popular. People weren't really requesting 4K, but I knew if I wanted to look good, I'm going to have to start shooting in 4K. Like, it's going to have to happen, especially for weddings. Even if you put it out as 1080p, at least shoot it in 4K. Like, that was my goal. So that's why I got it, but that's also why I got rid of it. It's funny. And I don't think it was a waste. I actually bought my next camera like 4 years deep, 4 or 5 years, something like that. I don't know. I've had this camera for a while. The Fuji XT3. It's I actually kept the Sony A6300, and I paired it with this for certain weddings because it had the telephoto lens. Like, I had I bought a little kit on Black Friday. It came with a power zoom like kit lens. I loved that little lens. And then it came with the telephoto, and I can't remember exactly which one it was, but it was handy for weddings. And I would use that on the tripod. So I'd set up the tripod, go run over here with the gimbal on this and shoot stuff, and then run back and make sure it's still recording, and or move it, or all that good stuff. And I ended up selling it because I was doing weddings for a while after that, but I didn't want to do that anymore, and I just like thought that I would never use it because I have the Fuji now, and it just looks a lot better because the 4K, the rolling shutter on the 4K on this was a beast. Because whenever I went to go buy this, I went to Best Buy and I looked at this, I put it in 4K 24 and just did this and just looked and seen how the rolling shutter was, because the A7 III was out too, and man, it was almost out of my budget. It was a little bit more than this because the lenses are so expensive. And that's why I've been going with the crop sensors, because I knew the lenses were cheap, the body was cheap. That's why I kept the crop sensor. And the Sony's rolling shutter was like the same. It was maybe like a hair better than the A6300. Even though it's a way better camera, it's a beautiful hybrid camera. It wasn't for me. It wasn't for me. The Fuji was calling my name. The manual buttons, the menu was a little bit better, but it is finicky. There are things I don't like about this menu system. And when you're using it all the time, it comes a time to upgrade. I had this for years now. Yeah, probably like 4 years, 3 or 4 years. I don't even know when I got it. But why I ended up upgrading was because, well, for one, it wasn't really video centric, because I knew, I'm like, all right, stay away from photos. I'm not doing any more family shoots, nothing like that. I'm gonna actually weed away from weddings eventually, like I have now. But I wanted something that was more video centric. Tell you the truth, I wouldn't have bought this camera right here had I been able to rig this out and put a V mount on it, because I was showing up to shoots with like 9 batteries. It was insane. Yes, they were third party, which one of them actually, you put the battery in and it resets all of the camera settings. So when you're mid shoot, it really jacks you up. And I did not like that. I didn't like that at all. So I ended up going with the Panasonic S5 IIX, and that's what I'm shooting on right now. And why I went with that? Sure, the shutter angle, the waveforms. Oh, let me retract back. That was another thing about this Fuji. The Sony, you can only do 50th of a second in 24. There was no 48. Like this, I could actually do a 180 shutter. And there was a little more video centric than the Sony to me at the time, even though the Sony was more expensive and had a worse rolling shutter. But it was a full frame camera. And the lenses were cheaper. That's why I went with the Fuji. Okay, so, but I went with this. All my cameras were crop sensors before. None of them had stabilization. And those were two big things I wanted, because I have shot on some other cameras. Well, the Ursa Mini Pro 12K, I think that's a crop sensor, or Super 35. But the 5D Mark IV, the Canon, I had that with the company that I worked for over a year. And I used it like every day, and I saw the benefit of the full frame. I will say the crop sensor has a benefit of its own, and then the full frame has its own benefit. They're like trade-offs, right? Because if you're like doing wildlife, you want the crop sensor. But if you're doing stuff like I'm doing, like you can have either or. But just something about the look that I was going for, and the distances, I had to stay away from my subject. Like I had to put on a bigger lens, like a longer lens, and then scoot back more to get the desired look. And it's like super tight, and I just felt like there was no breathing room in the frame for me. And it's just my style of how I like to shoot. And it wasn't, I felt like the full frame was like a little bit less awkward for me to, get the spacing between my subjects. Like I could talk to them, and it's easy. But the stabilization is a beast. The Panasonic stabilization is a beast. Let's face it, though, the rolling shutter isn't great. But as I got progressed in my skill set, I learned that, you're not really going to be you know, in a professional setting, jarring the camera around. So it's mainly going to be like this, or slow moving, or even handheld. The rolling shutter is not bad enough to shake, because I have it rigged out so it's a little bit more weighted, and the weight helps the little jitters, which that works out the jitters anyways, but I feel like it's just like a different handheld look with that versus without a rig and the weight. Which is why, remember the batteries on the XT3? Ended up getting the V-mount rig for that. Had I been able to do that for the Fuji, the V-mount and the cage, I looked online, you know, I could order it from Japan. I'm like, is it even worth putting money in this camera that I'm probably going to upgrade soon anyways? Probably not. Am I invested in some lenses? Yes. Yes, I am. But that's why I'm not getting rid of it, because there's going to be a time where I'm like, oh, I want the Fuji. And I've been through a lot with that camera, so I want to keep it. I'm not getting rid of it. But the S5 IIX, the ProRes looks amazing. I don't use it that much because the files are too big and the clients don't need it unless it's like something very specific. But I dabble with it here and there. I don't do anything crazy with it. It's really just the tools, like the ease of use. Like the buttons worked for me. The shutter angle, so whenever you have to switch your frame rate, it's going to have the same shutter speed, like there's a shutter angle. And I can just record on my SSD straight up to it. I don't have to mess with cards, none of that. And, you know, and let's face it, when your clients are paying you a good amount of money, you want to show up feeling confident, like, all right, like they're seeing what they paid for, you know, which it's like, it's kind of superficial, but it matters. It matters because, like, whenever it matters more for you than for them, but it does matter for them too. Because whenever you're on a shoot, you're shooting all the time. Like, I shoot on a weekly basis, like with multiple people. So I'll be out on a shoot and just fidgeting with little things on the Fuji that are not working for me. I'm like in the sun getting aggravated, you know, I'm like sweating on my camera and I'm like, I can't see the screen. I wanted to put a monitor on it, but I already was carrying like 9 batteries, so I don't really want to add another monitor battery to the mix, or 3 of them. I don't know how much it would take. But yeah, I wasn't able to do that. So that's why I ended up spending the bread on like a nice setup. Like, that's the only reason I did it. I didn't do it to look cool. You know, obviously it looks sick as fuck. But there's a method behind it. You know, let's say like this right here. You know, there's like the joke, you know, that the matte box is like, you know, that's the money maker. That's when you can charge a lot of money, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it looks sick, right? But you're shooting an ND filter on here. You put an ND filter on this lens. You have a sun glare. You can't put the lens hood over it. It doesn't work. And then your image is washed out. And it's an important moment, and that's the best angle you can possibly get. When you got this, all you have to do is, oh, there, sun's gone, you know? I mean, come on. There's a purpose behind it all. The people online that are talking about, like, you know, man, like, just trendy. They're so people online are so trendy. Why is everybody so trendy? So hopefully that section helps you guys out in deciding, like, oh, well, my camera's related to this, and you know, oh, that's why he upgraded. That maybe that's a reason why I should. Think about what you're doing though first. I hope it helps, but think about what type of things, videos or photos that you're going to be doing, and if it's totally necessary. Because once you get like to the mid-tier cameras, like mine's technically a mid-tier, you know, like from mid-tier to the high tier, there's like such a minimal difference in quality. If that's what you're worried about, I wouldn't even bother. But it's more so the tool, you know, like the little things about that camera, the way the settings can be set, little things like baked in LUTs, or, you know, if that's gonna severely speed up your workflow, like, great, go for that. I do that too. Like, that's why I got that camera, because I don't always want to grade log, but the log on this grades so much better than the F log on the Fuji, which bugged me too. And I knew that this was a good, you know, log format, and that's another reason why I went with it. Not so much the image quality, because I was kind of happy with the stuff I was getting, but now I'm just blown away, because it is great. It is great. But when you enjoy shooting with something, like, that feels comfortable and you're confident. You're not going to worry about like, oh, is this thing just going to randomly overheat on me and shut off like during a shoot, and then I have to go like sit in my truck and put in the AC for like 10 minutes. No, man. Can't be doing that whenever you're making good money doing that. No. But I hope that section helps you guys out. Well, let's look at some of the cameras on the market now. I'll go over like what camera do I think is best for somebody who wants to do weddings. Music videos and weddings kind of go hand in hand, but they don't. They don't, because there's different cameras that you could get for music videos if you're more deliberate. Because if you're doing deliberate shoots, you'll see. So, weddings, music videos, branded content. What type of branded content, though? That is what you're going to have to decide. All right, so we're on B&H. Going to go look at some cameras here. So for weddings, man, your go-to for weddings is typically Sony, I would say. You can do Canon too. I've shot a wedding on a Canon R5, and I've also graded that footage several times. It's fantastic. You know, sometimes the log, it can be a little wonky to edit. You gotta really add contrast. It's like soup. I don't know. Something's wrong with the conversion on there, but it's fine. Like, it looks fantastic. Like, I loved it, especially the slow motion. But you gotta get the fancy cards for it, and they're expensive. Not a big deal. Another thing about the R5 is that you can add the drop-in filter, one of these, drop-in filter, and you don't even have to run an ND on the front of your lens. So any lens you put on, but you have to use EF lenses, EF glass, which is used and cheaper, which is great. You can find those for a lot cheaper. So, and they're not much different than the RFs. The RFs are just lighter and just better tech, and they have an extra ring on the front that allows you to like add it, bind it to a setting, like if it's aperture or whatever, or ISO, or shutter speed. I'm sure it will do that too, but I never used that. It's kind of weird. R5's great. Sony, the A7 IV is a good one. That is a good hybrid camera. The megapixels are great. That's a 33, I think. 33 megapixels. Yeah, yep. And I forget, the codecs are good, I'm sure it edits fine on most, especially the new, like the M1, M2 chips on the Max. You can do some pretty cool stuff with this camera, I'm not gonna lie. The slow motion, what do you get, a crop at 60? The reason why I didn't go with this, because this was in my price range too. Like, I don't need the top of the line. I don't need an R5. I don't need an A9. Also, I don't even know how I didn't mention the FX3, FX6, and A7S III. That's crazy of me, because I was actually almost going to buy the FX6, or sorry, the FX3. I wish it was the FX6. The reason I didn't is because the body is definitely more than the Panasonic. There were things about the Panasonic I liked. Well, photos are better, for one. I wanted something to directly replace my Fuji, which I got that. Also, the lenses are expensive, like I said previously, and it doesn't have the open gate. I don't know if you know what open gate is, but if you Google it, or if you just like search Panasonic open gate, it records in 6K of the entire sensor, which is more of a square than a rectangle. So that way, people like me, maybe like you, doing vertical content, or if you want to shoot something one time and have it horizontal and vertical, the way you crop it in on vertical, you get more room. So you can actually compose your shots a little better, and it's not so stuffy. So that was why I ended up going with the Panasonic. I was looking at this, and the reason why I didn't get it, stabilization. You can do the gyroscope thing in post, but I was already stabilizing every single clip on my Fuji because it had none. And I was done with that. I just couldn't do that anymore. I did not, no. So, didn't go with that. What's another one? That one's good for weddings, though, I will say. But honestly, bro, if you want to do weddings, S5 II. Just get the S5 II. I'm telling you, it's the best bang for your buck. The lenses are affordable. I just bought the 50mm I have on here. I just bought it the other day for like $350, brand new. It's not the Pro one, but like I said, from mid-tier to Pro tier, is like such a minimal increment of improvement that is it even justifiable unless you really got it like that and you got to spend some tax money? I don't know. S5 II though, what a beast. I have the 2X because I wanted the ProRes and the blacked out look, of course. You know, it's pretty sick. Which the difference is minimal though, because if you're shooting a wedding, you're not going to be shooting in ProRes. You're not going to shoot a wedding in ProRes. The files are going to be massive. So that's good. So yeah, so that's the S5 IIX, the one I got. It's a little bit more. So how much was that? That's $2,100 versus $1,700, $8,900, so $400 difference for the ProRes. I thought it was worth it. I thought so. And the what did I get? The 24-105. That's what I rock, and that's great. It's great because I just had a Fuji, so I didn't have any Canon lenses, or I just had the Fuji, so I didn't have any Lumix lenses. When you look at the difference in the lens prices, your mind will be blown. Sony is capping. Sony is so expensive. I don't know why. Is the glass that great? Probably. All right, so let's move on though. Let's move on. So if you're gonna shoot weddings, I would say the A7 IV. If you want Sony and you already have Sony glass, that's a good purchase. If you don't have any glass at all, I would go with the Panasonic because the stabilization is great. It's great. And you never have to worry about that. And the image looks fantastic. Running a monitor, there is a little latency in the monitor, but there's a little trick where you can have it not run audio through the HDMI, so it does speed it up a little bit, but it is a little latency lag. And I'm not sure if the Sony has that same issue. But that would be the only reason I would think I would go with the Sony if I had no glass for either or. But the Panasonic is just the best bang for buck, and especially if you're doing videos, you got the waveforms, which, you know, it's not a huge deal. It's really not. But does it help? Yeah, it helps. The shutter angle. Oh, you're trying to run over here and shoot one of them saying their vows, like the bride saying their vows or something right at the end of the wedding, and you want to shoot that in real time, so like 24, and then you run to the aisle and you want to get them, you know, right before they kiss. You got to switch it over to slow motion if you want to do that, or if you want them slow motion walking down the aisle. On any other camera, you're going to have to change your shutter speed too, which that you can just flip a dial in your I guess you could flip a dial on the Sony too if you do set a custom mode. But if you're not running that, if you change a frame rate, it's not going to matter. Like, it's going to stay the same. It's going to be the 180 shutter all the way through. So yeah, I would go with the Panasonic, and not just being biased. If you want to go with a Canon, I would say probably if you can afford the R5, go with the R5. If you can't, R6 Mark II. Let's see that. R6 Mark II. Which, the reason I was looking at this heavy because I do shoot photos. Sometimes I'm like shooting, you know, videos, and I'm like, oh, I want a little still of that. I want a still of that. I love the fact that you can just switch the video and photo mode like that. That's awesome. Is it totally necessary? Not really. But that was enough to get me interested in it, and it looked great. Like, the image looks great. Like, Canon colors, you know the deal. But all the colors and everything's pretty good now. I love my Lumix colors. And, you know, I will say, there was something about it. The reason why I didn't get this is because you can only shoot in C-Log at like a, what was it, 422? Like, if you want to shoot 422, you can't, like, bake in the LUT, which the Panasonic, you can have a real-time LUT, so you can either preview the LUT on your camera and not bake it in and have log to edit with, or real-time LUT, where it, like, takes log and bakes it into the footage as you're shooting it. So whenever you put it on your computer, it's already converted, and it looks great. It really does. And then you still have flexibility with that, especially if you're shooting 422. I've like pulled back some clouds the other day, and it looked fantastic. So there. If you want to do music videos, what kind of music videos are you gonna do? Are you the gimbal god? Or that is an actual person. But are you the gimbal person that's doing all this? It's not necessary. What I would recommend is Blackmagic. Yeah, the 6K. 6K is perfect. That was another one I was looking at, the 6K Pro, because it has the ND filters built in. But had I went with that, I would have to stabilize it in post. The form factor is weird as shit on there. I don't like that. And no photos. Like, this one takes great photos right out of camera, so I could shoot JPEGs on these all day. That's why I didn't go with this. It's preference. And of course, the bigger ones, you're getting something like this. Like, I've shot on this before, a commercial. Like, would I take this and lug this to most of my shoots? Which I'll go to like a roofing job, or if I was doing like talking head stuff only, if that was like exclusively what I did, I would get this, something like this. But for music videos, this would be sick. Actually, that would be sick. And even if you're doing commercials, I would say the Blackmagic is great. But I'm telling you, man, the Panasonic, nobody, obviously it's my first video on my channel. No one's paying me shit. But I will say that it's great all around because it looks fantastic and it's versatile, and you can just take it and run with it with the 24-105 and get everything you need. And the 24-105 is a macro lens too, so I actually had to help at a wedding, which I'm not taking on any of those right now, but I was assisting somebody else's wedding, and I was shooting the rings with the macro lens, and it's fantastic. I've never been able to do that on my crop sensor because all the focal distance is like so far that you couldn't really get up on there. I can just rig this camera up with the 24-105, unless I'm doing real estate. If you're doing real estate, damn. No, scratch that. Even if you're doing real estate with this camera, you won't be able to do it with the 24-105. You need a wide angle lens. But the stabilization is great because I did it with my wide angle on this, which, where's it at? All the real estate stuff I've done in the past, which I've done a lot of real estate shoots, I really have. Not on my own terms. I worked for a company and it was whatever, but wide angle lens, no stabilization. Fuji body, no stabilization. Pair that with the Ronin S, and what do you get? Shaky footage. You get shaky footage. Is the Sony going to be that much better? Is the Canon going to be that much better? Yes, it will. Because if it has any in-body stabilization on a gimbal, it's going to be fine, I will say. But you can almost get a gimbal-like look holding the Panasonic without any rig at all. Like any stabilization rig, I would say. Because mine is rigged out and the weight does help, I feel like. But it does, like when you have the heavier lens on there, you kind of, when you're out in the heat and you're lacking water, hydration, you get a little shaky because of the weight. But I'm just being a little bitch. But I will say that is why I went with the Panasonic. That is why I got that camera. Now that I'm editing, I gotta say the S5 II and S5 IIX, the drawback for me is that it crops in at 60 frames per second, and it doesn't have 120p like the super slow motion in 4K. It only has it in 1080. So whenever you're shooting 60 frames per second slow motion, you have to have the crop, But if you're coming from a crop sensor camera and you go to a full frame camera, the crop isn't so bad. So my 60 frames per second in 4K on the Fuji was a cropped on a crop. So it's not really a drawback for me. But I could see potential users that came from full frame and they want super slow motion, or they don't want to crop at 60. That would be an issue. But, there's so many ways now to where you can make 60 even slower with AI and some of the editing software. So just keep that in mind. I know I'm kind of getting off track here, but I just wanted to kind of give you guys a rundown for those of you who just have no clue what to look for. And if you guys have any questions in the comments, please do let me know, and I'll answer them as best as possible, or I can make more videos about whatever your questions are. This is my first video on the channel. I'm kind of sporadic and just all over the place with this, but I hope it helped at least somebody out there that is on the fence of upgrading, and maybe it answered your question that you don't need to upgrade, or maybe it did answer your question about upgrading. So Yeah. So without further ado, I'll see you on the next one.